Hi folks, welcome to the Sunday edition of the iRate Radio podcast, Videocast. We're going to kind of concentrate on the Marr show today and two articles written by Alex Massie for the Times. One yesterday, one today. Massie is a unionist, but occasionally stumbles into the truth. Today's article, well, yesterday and today's articles are a bit more in his spectator writing line, a bit more anti, but they throw up a couple of questions. So let's kick off with Marr. Both you and I watched it all, but you've taken the time to take notes. Stewart, what did you think?
Hi there, Norrie. Yes. I broke my own rule. I must have been feeling very calm this morning, as you know, and regular viewers and listeners will know that I don't take kindly to watching Marr, especially Boris on the telly. Combination is normally my blood pressure going through the roof. However, I sat down to do it today, and I was okay. Generally, I would say, before I get into any of the meat, I thought the producer or the director, whoever was deciding the questions and what should be asked out of Andrew Marr's mouth, gave him far too many questions to ask, which made it very difficult for Andrew to manage Boris. But also, Boris was surprisingly, he was not the usual Boris we've seen for a while. He was almost normal. You know, he was answering the questions, and he remembered the script and all the rest of it, which was really odd. And I didn't throw even a bunch of rolled up socks at the telly.
Well, I'm not sure I agree that he answered the questions.
He answered most of them. Usually he answered.
I'm not sure he did. He did an awful lot of waffling. Took 7 words when one would have done.
Well, that's what he, of course, he needs to do. But another point I'd like to make before any meat was that he used a different expression. He never used the word science once. His new mantra is public health considerations. And he used it about half a dozen times.
Well,
this is his new...
The bit that sticks in my mind is the area when he said there was disagreement between scientists.
Well, yeah, I suppose he mentioned them there, but he certainly doesn't say he never mentioned he was following the science. So
well, that was the question he was asked. And that's kind of when he said, oh, scientists are contradicting themselves. So basically, that's another bow to the excuses.
So we had all the anticipated questions about schools, because that's the hot topic in England. It's a side topic here, of course. There were 2 topics that are hitting the headlines this weekend. Is it the weekend? Oh, it's Sunday. It's all right. We get away with that, don't we? One of them is the way they're going to deliver the vaccines with this big gap now. Instead of 3 weeks, they're going to be 12 weeks or something. And the other one was the question of them inventing or going on to a tier 5 in England, and that would almost certainly mean keeping the schools closed. So these were the hot topics, but I'm not sure we learned much more about that. What did on the schools and the tier 5 in England? These are both English issues, really.
Yes, they are. Although I fully expect the recall of Holyrood to involve an extension of the school closures. Schools in Scotland are closed for some pupils till the 18th of January. I think that might be extended to all pupils and possibly to the end of January.
Which is, yes, could be another fortnight.
Yeah, so you'll get fully a month.
So
28 days.
We've got, there have been figures coming out, and they're very worrying for Scotland. So yes, we could easily be getting more restrictions. Before we go on with more to talk about with Boris, but Marr interviewed Arlene Foster, the First Minister of Northern Ireland, earlier on. And there was one point in there that left me puzzling and wonder if you can answer this question. What she said was that the Northern Ireland Protocol, which created, because she was asked a question about what about the border down the Irish Sea? Why aren't you so upset about it? And she said, well, there isn't really one there. There was one there before, animals, and all the rest of it. She made their usual excuses. But what she did say was that the protocol is only for 4 years. And then the Assembly can vote to end it. Now, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it gets revisited. I think it's actually 5 years. Well, she probably knows better than me, eh? So probably 4 years, but I think it's 5. Yeah, they get to revisit it and decide whether to maintain it or get rid of it.
So they get special. I mean, they get things like once in a generation in Northern Ireland for another referendum is 7 years. Apparently, a generation in England lost because of their education lost because of COVID is 1 year. But Scotland doesn't get to have another referendum, even though 6 years have already gone by.
Well, it's politics, I mean, if Nicola Sturgeon can dictate the timing of another referendum, all she has to do is get up and say, well, actually, I was wrong about that. It should be held every 5 years until we win. And if Boris has to take her word for the once in a generation, he's obliged to take her word for that change of policy. So, I mean, you and I both know, everybody knows it's politics.
Of course
That's it. What I noticed about Arlene Foster was she never once used the word border. Right? I think 3, maybe 4 times Marr
border
asked her about the border down the Irish Sea, and she did everything. She totally avoided using the word border. I mean, they must be hopping mad. The DUP must be absolutely livid.
The trouble is that
Boris Johnson's treated them.
They have, in a recent poll, they asked the attitudes of the electorate in Northern Ireland. I think it was 25% of the electorate wouldn't define themselves as British or Irish, but just Northern Irish. And they're assumed to be basically unionists, well, Protestants, not Catholics and not nationalists. And in any poll, I don't think there would be a yes or no poll for the border. I think there would probably be a 2-question poll, or 3 questions rather. The one would be to just have a sort of dominion state or whatever it almost is for Northern Ireland.
I would be very surprised if, maybe not the wording, but the outline, how many questions, etc., if that isn't already decided within the Good Friday Agreement. I'd be surprised if there wasn't already rules for it.
I don't agree with you there. I think that would be the word is incendiary, given what politics are like there. I think that there has to be room for a fudge in Northern Ireland politics.
Yeah, I'm not saying there isn't that, but I would be surprised if there isn't outline rules for it. I couldn't see them just being allowed to say a cross-border poll, full stop. I couldn't see the unionists accepting that at the time.
No, I agree with you there. This is what I'm suggesting. There might be Northern Ireland could have the status of a crown dependency like the Channel Islands or the Isle of Man. They're much more independent than Northern Ireland or Scotland.
Well, I'm not sure there would have been an option for an independent Northern Ireland. I can't see that, because that suits neither side. Why would either one of them agree to it?
Well, I'm not a genius on Northern Ireland, but then again, a fudge is maybe the answer. After all, they've got 20 miles of community walls in Belfast, haven't they?
I think if things go well for Northern Ireland, the status quo will be what people vote for. If they do actually end up with best of both worlds, to quote Mr. Gove, I think they'll go for continuity in 4 years. Who knows?
Who knows? I suppose about return to Boris's approach to the interview. He didn't maintain his what I said at the start, his answering all the questions. You're right. I mean, he moved on to saying things like, "Oh, we need to be realistic. We need to be humble." Humble.
This is a new line he's using.
We can see the way ahead. How we can get out of this. This was him coming back to. What he never mentioned was that I don't think he said. Somebody pointed out to him that article by Marina Hyde, describing him as he always puts himself as the victim every time he talks about this pandemic. I couldn't identify anywhere where that was clearly what he was saying in this interview. I think he'd been rehearsed on that one.
I mean, he's a showman, and he should be able to learn his lines. Well, I mean, it amazes me actually that he doesn't have a sheet in front of him with the facts and figures. You know, why? That's the biggest criticism of him, is that he doesn't have that stuff at his fingertips. He's obviously not an idiot. I mean, he can be a buffoon without being an idiot. Surely somebody has said to him, you need to get past this point where everybody thinks you're just superficial. But obviously thinks he can get away with it.
Certainly in the middle part of the interview with Marr, the questions and answers were coming and going. I've got PJ, Boris Johnson, Marr, Boris Johnson, Marr, line after line after line. Marr wasn't letting him answer the questions with the answer that he wanted to give because he wasn't answering the question he'd been asked. And this went 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2.
The problem with the interview was that he is stronger than Marr, and he just spoke over him or continued answering, a question that required a sentence. You got a monologue. So, I mean, nothing changes.
And there was one question that Marr was very keen to, he thought he could put him, hoist him on this one, was some scientific report in July last year, which he hadn't read. Did you read it? And
he made the classic mistake of admitting he hadn't read.
So he just stood there, sat there and didn't say anything. He didn't say yes or no, but he didn't. He could have.
Well, he obviously hadn't read it.
Obviously, I hadn't read it. I don't know. I mean, it went on and on, but.
Will we have a wee look at the clip of him answering the
question? I've got one very good quote from Boris Johnson to finish that section of the interview.
All right, give me a sec to set it up.
Oh, I can say it before you clip go if you want. Oh, you've clicked go.
What is it? No, on you go.
No, what he said was he came up with something, an expression. He accused somebody's having a view of a retrosteptoscope. I'm not quite sure what a retrosteptoscope is. I'll need to find out.
Did he mean stetho? Who knows? Anyway, here's Boris Johnson on Marr being asked about an independence referendum for Scotland.
It's going to be bumpy.
And a lot of people are observing this from afar, including in Scotland. And there are, if I am a Scottish...
Why do you say afar?
Well, Scotland's a little while away from where we're sitting now. It's 500 miles or so away.
Part of our country.
400. Well, that is my point. If I am a Scottish voter, imagine me as a Scottish voter sitting in Edinburgh or Glasgow. Maybe I voted in favour of the union in the referendum. But since then, I've seen Brexit happen, and I don't like Brexit. And I've seen the way your government's behaved over the coronavirus pandemic, and I prefer Nicola Sturgeon's version of that. And I want my country, Scotland, to leave the UK. What are the democratic tools in my hands to do that?
Well, I think that obviously the most important thing is the referendum that you had in 2014, which was a very important.
Before Brexit and before the pandemic, things have changed, and a lot of people want to leave the UK.
I mean, life moves on. Things change. I don't. If you're saying that you would like to have another referendum,
This Scottish voter would like another referendum,
okay, well,
and wants the Democrat. He's only got a vote. So he wants to use that vote to allow it to happen. How can they do that?
I think the only point I would make is that referendums, in my experience, direct experience in this country, are not particularly jolly events. They
change things.
They don't have a notably unifying force in the national mood. They should be only once in a generation. And I think that was what.
Well, we'll come to Brexit in a second. But what is different? What is different about the English wanting to leave the EU and having a referendum and being allowed to do that, and Scotland wanting to leave the UK and doing exactly the same thing? What's the difference?
The difference is that we had a referendum in 1975, and we then had another one in 2016. That seems to be about the right sort of gap.
All right. How about that? Let's move to Brexit. Because the OBR says 4%.
Well,
and that was your lot for questions on Scotland.
Yes, apart from the very last line in the interview, but
well, taking the timescale that Johnson talked about there for the EU referendums, that would be 2055.
Well, no, I'd rather focus on the point that Andrew Marr made. What are the democratic tools? If you remove the democratic tools, he should have said, are you not encouraging violence?
Oh, you're not living in a democracy. If there is no democratic tool that Westminster will allow for Scotland to vote on independence, you're not living in a democracy.
And if you're not living in a democracy, you can anticipate violence from your opposition.
Well, there's been quite a bit of writing that started to touch on that. You know, what does the Scottish independence movement do if the democratic road is blocked?
Mm-hmm. Do you think that's what Boris's backers would like to see?
No, I don't. I'm actually quite surprised. If they're going to try and play for time, they need something to play with for that time. So they need to come up with some ploy to put the independence referendum on the back burner. So there has to be something else to play with constitutionally.
Well, that's, of course, is the argument, that to make it a UK issue,
that's
in federalism.
Position. That's Starmer's position. Matthew Paris, writing in the Times, he's talking about a royal commission to decide the parameters of any future referendums. Time wasting. It's all about time wasting.
You know my position on that. You can't come up whatever the Royal Commission comes up with, it is time wasting, because until you have a written constitution, any rules for any future referendum can be changed by the Parliament that is freshly elected.
And that applies to a federal situation. I mean, people forget that most countries that have a federal situation do not have a level playing field between each federation. Because some federations are poor and are looking for handouts, others are rich and expected to pay tax to cover those handouts.
You also have different populations in the different parts or regions or states or whatever you call them.
There is absolutely nothing to stop them in a federal setup outlawing an independence referendum. So there are dangers in federalism, even if it's the most federal Gordon Brown federalism.
I'm sticking on my point, because according to what my latest information is, and it's the same as 20 years ago or 30 years ago, there are only two countries in the world that don't have written constitutions. One of them is New Zealand and the other one's the United Kingdom. And until that is corrected, you have an elected dictatorship every time there's a new government.
Well, I mean, that's always been the case. And I've said it on this show on more than one occasion. The minute your general election is over and decided, the people in power are dictators. And now they don't even hide behind decency. They don't even pretend they've got a moral compass. They just do what they want and then go on television and lie about it. And that is actually really scary. When you stop pretending, or you cease to care enough to pretend to hide the shenanigans.
It's worse than that, Norrie. I think it's worse than that. As I say, it's the mind of a gangster. It's not just pretending that they don't care. It's deliberately doing it liberally in your face. It's what the bully does in the school playground. Once he's battered you, comes back and just looks at you and across the school playground. He wants everybody to know that you've been battered.
Well, I don't think Johnson is going to turn into that, but they're going to have to come up with a ploy, and it's going to have to be a goodie, because federalism will not work. The only thing that will work is putting real power into the hands of a Scottish Parliament, which means a veto on policy and the right to call, for me, the right to call an independence referendum at the time of the choosing of a Scottish Parliament. Yeah, if they don't do that, it's just another version of the same control.
Yeah, but you know my position on that is that the next, if that goes on for, let's say, a term of a Westminster Parliament, the next government comes in on a different mandate and they just revoke the Federalism Act. Boom.
Which is why it needs to be put into law.
Needs a written constitution.
Each country of the four nations has the right to hold a referendum at the time of their choosing. And they won't do that.
They won't do that.
They won't do that because that actually gives you a lot of power.
And you know, this all stems from what they called the golden, God, my brain's gone. 1688, when they brought in William and Mary and they kicked out James. And ever since then, the sovereignty of the House of Commons has been, you know, a Westminster Parliament has been, it's unlike anywhere else in the world.
And we joined in when? 1705?
1707.
1707. I heard some idiot.
So we had no share in deciding that.
No, exactly. And I heard some idiot Conservative MP telling us it had been over 400 years we'd had the union.
Oh, no, the only union's only, that union we're in now is only 100 years old.
Exactly. So, well, you know my stance. We renegotiate the Treaty of Union.
We've got Massie in his approach to the current situation. But there's one quote I really like to make before we leave Marr. Because Andrew Marr said almost, they were running out of time. It was almost like a throwaway remark, but it was a response to Boris's approach to effectively Scotland. And he said, you're an Englishman talking to a Scot. What does he mean by that?
I think you're reading too much into that. Because I know what you think is that Marr may be leaning on the indie side of the fence.
No, I'm suspect he might get an ear battering when he was in Scotland in the autumn there after not seeing his family for a long time because of the pandemic. And he came up and spent some time here, and his family maybe gave him a right ear walloping.
I don't think he'll cease to be a unionist anytime soon.
Well, almost certainly not.
Right, Alex Massie, what did you think?
Well, Alex Massie, which part of it? There was two articles. Let me just bring it up in front of me so I can get me. There were two articles published in theory 2 days apart, although they were both. I think they were both apparently in the Sunday Times today. I don't have paper versions. This is the modern world. You know, you think you know what's happening, but the printed version could be different. However, what is he saying here? Britain is splintering beneath the Brexit king. Effectively, now that we're here in 2021 and Brexit is done, the focus in London is now really swinging right up and to look at Scotland in particular, but also Northern Ireland and Wales. I've got quote after quote after quote, but there are some that I think, one or two, it's the usual rubbish. What did Bornes say at the beginning of this article? It's time we unleashed the productive power, not just of London and the southeast, but of every corner of England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Oh, well, even before you go any further, you know, the assumption in that is, oh, London and the southeast comes first. The constituent parts of the UK form an awesome foursome whose values are incarnated in that red, white, and blue flag. Did you enjoy that?
That's Boris talking. I mean, it's I mean, anybody that doesn't kind of automatically switch off when he starts the jingoistic stuff, I don't understand how he gets through to anybody. You know, because he blethers so much shit.
Yeah, but look at all the people that are Trump supporters in America.
No, I don't want to look at the people that are Trump supporters in America. And I mean, if he can't stand up and do anything but flag wave and bang drums, I don't want to listen to him.
That's all. I mean,
you know,
this could be controversial, but this goes back to the franchise, the voting franchise. Now we have a vote. Everybody's entitled to vote. We're all equal, but the voting franchise was withheld for a very long time from people who didn't have any property. And then when that was discussed at considerable length, I think John Stuart Mill was a great supporter of the idea that they even suggested that you had to have a certain level of education before you were allowed to vote. Now, has things changed? An awful lot of the people that vote for likes of Boris or vote for Donald Trump, I'm going to be controversial here, don't actually know what they're voting for. They just see this gloss.
Yeah, but it doesn't matter whether you're having an education doesn't make you smarter. Having an education doesn't make you more intelligent or incapable of thought. Then, you know, the fact that you're a motor mechanic and didn't go to university doesn't make your thoughts and conclusions on the information you're given any less valid.
I agree with you, but unfortunately,
and if you
there are politicians that play on the fact that a lot of people, politics, I switch off, they'll tell you. Nothing to do with me.
Well, I mean, that is a fault of the education that everybody is entitled to. You know, I mean, I believe that people should be taught of the importance of politics. But if you don't allow everybody to vote and you do it as you once did on property or on your educational achievements, you get back to an even worse elite than we've got now.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there was ever any, I'm not sure if there has been anywhere where you had to have a certain education attainment to be allowed to vote. But I know that it was an issue in the Victorian times. I like the way
that was an argument against women getting the vote.
They were stupid.
Because they didn't have the mental capacity. And look at us now. Some of the best, strongest, wisest leaders in the world, if not the best. Yeah, New Zealand, Germany, Scotland, arguably.
You never know. You never know. Even the United States, they might be going down that road.
Maybe you shouldn't be allowed office without a proof of empathy with the people that you're supposed to represent. Maybe that's the way to look at it.
I like the way Alex Massie starts this long article, well, medium-sized article, and he's got one or two valid points. He says here, a new phrase entered the political lexicon last year as ministers across the realm talked of the four nations approach required to combat the coronavirus. This is the grounds for his position that, well, we've heard all the four nations approach to the pandemic. Day in, day out, week in, week out. This has been the case, and this is new. I can't disagree with that. Can you?
No, this is the veiled argument for Westminster taking back control.
It is. I mean,
It's
he
not
says
what
here,
he says.
it's what he suggests. He says here in 2020, the UK's internal borders became harder. No, that's just,
Yeah.
you're not allowed to make that conclusion, Alex. That doesn't follow from what we just introduced.
Well, I mean, and it is. And at the heart of every unionist, there is a kernel that says we should never have had devolution. In fact, I'm sure at the heart of every English unionist, there's a kernel that said we should never have let the Celtic nations into our parliament. But I might be exaggerating there. I do think that Peter A. Bell's argument about the undermining of Holyrood, which I have to say, agreed with. There's a few things I don't agree with Peter about, but I always thought that the Tories would see that as a way to undermine independence.
Boiling the frog.
I think they're wrong. I think that will backfire spectacularly on them.
Well, here's another thing that Alex Massie says that I don't agree with. He claims here that there was a difference in emphasis between Theresa May's government and his government and Boris's government in their approach, in particular to Scotland, about Brexit. And it says here, officials working on Brexit detected a shift of emphasis as soon as he replaced Theresa May. Where May took union concerns seriously, establishing a unit, you can establish what you like, within the Department for Exiting the European Union that focused on devolved issues, Johnson's approach was more cavalier. I'm sorry, Alex, I think I'd rather believe Mike Russell, who pointed out that he's been dealing with Brexit ever since the Brexit referendum, and we were totally ignored by the May government just as much as by the Johnson government.
I actually think he's probably right. And the reason I think that is the choice of words that May used to deny the Section 30, which is now is not the time. If that had never been said by May and Boris Johnson had come into power, it would have been a no. There would have been no watering down, no way to try and sidestep it without upsetting anybody. At least May took the time to think about what the reply should sound like to Scottish ears. I mean, it was as annoying for any independent supporter as a no, but it allowed for the possibility, which was a delaying tactic.
Okay, let's the next point that we might agree on then. In an age of identity-driven politics, however, technical details and hard economic realities play second fiddle to the questions of who we are as a people. If Britain must take back control from Brussels to be a truly independent or sovereign nation again, it is little surprise that Sturgeon makes the same argument for Scotland from the UK. But he goes on to use the argument about trade. We've lost the simplicity of trade without regulations with the EU. Well, he suggests that would be the situation with Scotland with regard to the UK, and makes a case for that against independence.
And that will be the argument. The argument this time round will be two-prong. It'll be you'll lose the UK as a trading partner, which is not proved by Brexit. If the Tories are telling the truth, we will continue to trade just as they claim we will continue to trade with Brexit. And the second prong is going to be not mentioned, I don't think, in this article, is going to be an out-and-out assault on the idea that the EU will welcome Scotland back. That's already starting to be to appear in print here and there. There's I can't remember who it was today had a piece saying that the EU will not accept Scotland back.
Well, that's a campaign strategy to have a go at potential independence voters who really are after getting back into the EU.
And that, I think, will become a stronger and stronger attack method. Regardless of what the EU says, they're simply going to say you're not getting back in.
What about Blair McDougall? Remember him, the official leader of the Better Together campaign at 2014.
Mr. I'm going to steal your pension, McDougall.
He's quoted as saying, "It's ironic that it is Brexit which ought to stand as a cautionary tale against nationalist misadventures that has dented confidence amongst supporters of staying in the UK."
Well, the problem with the argument they have is it's the stated ambition of the SNP to rejoin Europe, which is 27 countries and 10 times the size of the UK market. So they have to stop short of that. So they have to talk about the UK market as being our biggest market. They can't talk about Europe being an even bigger potential market.
Yeah, but that makes an assumption. We have to choose. It doesn't. Why should we have to choose?
Because they won't let us use the pound. They won't buy our sheep. They won't buy our fish. They won't buy our electricity. And they most certainly will not want our water. That is because they'll cut off their nose to spite their face.
Well, the other day I mentioned in one of our shows that they've now established a market for water in California. And I discovered that there's been a market for water in Australia for 20 or 30 years. And there are futures now. The NASDAQ, one of the main exchanges in New York, is now setting up a whatever they call it. You'll be able to gamble on water, price of water in the future.
It's going to come. It's going to come.
And Scotland's got plenty of it.
And I notice I'm not sure how many paragraphs were in this article, but there is only one on Scotland's fiscal deficit, because the UK's fiscal deficit is going to look horrendous after this pandemic. So do we stay chained to a UK with that kind of deficit, or do we take successor state as international law and walk away with no debt?
And I saw it even suggested that no, and we don't give them back. We don't allow them to take their nuclear submarines down to Devonport. We take them over and scrap them. We've got a lot of scrap money and scrap. In fact, we could probably sell them on to Ukraine or somewhere like that and do quite well.
Sell them to Iran.
Sell them to Iran. No, Massie says here that the difficulties on currency, Scotland's fiscal deficit, that's an imaginary deficit, pensions, mortgages, and the prospects of rejoining the EU remain the unanswered questions. And yet, just 2 paragraphs below, he says, some Scottish Tories are in a state of barely suppressed despair. I think it's over, I really do, says one leading Tory. Make up your mind.
Well, I think the Tories have good reason to be in despair. Because if a solution to the refusal of the Section 30 is found, the game's a bogey.
Yeah, we've still got Martin Keaton's court case, and we have other issues that there's a court. I don't know if that will bring up a guy called Dicey in the 1920s. It's about the legality of what they did, the Edinburgh Agreement, by restricting them. I mean, I'm not quite sure if Salmond realised the effect of it, or Cameron, but the Edinburgh Agreement for the last election, referendum, may not have made any difference to the question of just how can you break the Treaty of Union.
Well, yeah, it's a treaty. 2 sides signed it. We're not happy with it 300 years later. We want to renegotiate.
And it's been broken by England many times since.
Oh, so you just walk away from it.
I found those stats about the Northern Irish residents here, just before we move on. Talking about the situation in Northern Ireland, 40% of Northern Irish residents describe themselves as British only, 25% Irish only, and a further 20% who will determine Ireland's future consider themselves Northern Irish only.
It doesn't sound accurate to me.
Well,
Only 20% of the Northern Irish consider themselves Irish.
40% Northern Irish are British only, 25% Irish only, and another 20% Northern Irish only. I don't know.
That's a very low percentage for Irish only.
It's a long article, and I'm not saying that every conclusion that Alex Massie comes to in it is right or wrong, but he does say that Brexit was a very English revolution. It sparked nationalist revivals in Wales, Northern Ireland, and Scotland. Where do we go, hey?
Well, I mean, Massie, I like Massie's writing, and he does come at things from a different angle. But it wouldn't matter if every question asked by him was answered in Scotland's favour. He would still be British. He'd still be a unionist, because I think he's already admitted the thing we were never allowed to admit as independence supporters. There is an emotional element to this, but you know, Fraser Nelson and Massie, I think, have both said emotionally it's important to be British to them. Find the emotional argument for Britain.
Heart and head.
So, well, the rules will change in whichever way suits them. I was reading one of the Times articles where this idea that the BBC are SNP biased.
Well, who wrote that rubbish?
Raised its head again. Who are these people? I mean, the guy's based in England, but you know, where do they get this idea that there is any support in the mainstream media for the SNP?
As I say, calm down there, Norman. Don't forget, there's a whole department under Michael Gove putting out this kind of rubbish. Well,
if they're biased against the unionist parties, it'll be a scoosh if there's another referendum.
I've got a wee thing here that we're running out of time, are we?
Yeah, we are getting a bit tight.
Just like to mention Scott Goes Pop's poll fundraiser. That's James Kelly. He runs crowdfunders just to pay for polls, and they're useful. He's just run another one. He was looking for 7,500. This is yesterday morning. They'd already got 6,300. So I don't think there's any problem getting there. And then there might even be, as well as the usual question, which is the same as the last referendum. He usually pays for other questions. And there might be a currency question again. I'm not sure whether Tim Rideout of the Scottish Currency Group there might be something there. There won't be one about Plan B, which there have been in the last couple of times he's paid for, James Kelly's paid for these polls. And there won't be one on a plebiscitary election next May. I know you don't think it's feasible in any case. And you're probably right.
I mean, it will be the question at the top of the sheet, but you can't expect a political party that's in government to go on one policy.
They have to defend their record, I suppose.
Yeah, you know, they have to have education, health policies as well. You know, it will be. I mean, the Tories will end up fighting it that way, even though they say they want to fight it on the SNP's record. But they will, because that's the only way they get votes.
Well,
we'll call it a day at that.
I think so.
And hope that Jimmy, who is busy manufacturing the mother of all hangovers, I think, at the moment. And
I
Phil, who is out walking, keeping himself fit,
think he's out there with a Doug.
will possibly be with us tomorrow, but we'll be here anyway, the
Okay.
stalwarts.
The old
So,
guys.
thanks, Stuart.
Okay, cheerio.
I'm Norrie, and thanks for listening and watching, folks. We'll catch you all tomorrow.